Hey, welcome back to another installment of the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro, Miami Hurricanes beat writer for The Athletic. It is Cinco de Mayo. That's right, Friday, May 5th, around 2:30 p.m. I got Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast with me. It's been a couple weeks since I've had a show. Frank Tucker was with me last time. We did a lot of recruiting stuff. Carlos, it's been a while since you've come on with me because you've been busy with tax season, and now you're out of tax season and you're preparing alcohol. Tell us about your process there, what you're making.
Yeah, man. So although I filed like 100 extensions over the last 2 weeks of tax season, and I still got a bunch of work left to do over the course of the summer, I am taking today as just a me day with my family, and I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make something called summer beer that I found online.
All
So
right.
basically, it's beer, frozen lemonade, and vodka, and you mix all that together, and it's supposed to be a nice, refreshing summer drink. Now I'm gonna take it up a notch, and I'm gonna put it through a Brita filter, so that way it's nice and pure, and you can't really taste the alcohol, so it can be nice and dangerous.
Nice. It sounds nice. It sounds relaxing. Sounds like the kind of thing I want to be doing. Instead, I'm going to be in my backyard pressure cleaning and the front yard, by the way. I got to do both sides. Clean the walkway, all that kind of stuff. So I will be out there sweating while you're enjoying a nice drink. It is the season though to be relaxing, right? I mean, we are in the middle of May. The Miami Hurricanes have wrapped up spring football. That was a couple weeks back. Now it's sort of transfer portal season, and this is actually a big weekend for the Hurricanes. They got a lot of guys that they've been targeting in the portal that'll be coming through this weekend and visiting. We're going to get into that shortly. I also wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about the NFL draft. You had three Hurricanes drafted a week ago. Tyreek Stevenson goes in the second round, Will Mallory in the fifth, and DJ Ivy in the seventh round. We'll talk about the draft some. Alabama's baseball coach. I don't know if you saw this. He lost his job over gambling. And I only bring up the subject because I'm surprised, Carlos, that to this point, Miami has somehow survived getting in trouble with gambling all these years. It's kind of been very fortunate that
Well, listen, as you know, down here, if people are intending to do things that are, let's say, extra legal or maybe not down the straight and narrow, the people that they are doing those things with, or, in this case, a bookie, in other cases, a dealer, those guys are pretty low key and
Mhm.
aren't going to rat anybody out. So I don't know how this guy got caught. Was he betting online? Was he betting with like in a
I think he
public
had
forum?
somebody go and bet in person on his behalf while they were in Ohio. It was Alabama versus LSU. That's what it was regarding that series, and for whatever reason, somehow, some way,
And he bet on his own team?
I don't know if he bet on his own team. I don't know the specifics, but look, it's an incident that involving a coach for the first time. It's usually been the players, right? Point shaving, right? You think of the Arizona basketball scandal, Arizona State.
Well, listen, I did hear there was a big time pig race in Alabama that weekend. So maybe he was trying to get his money on and put his money on one of those pigs, one of them there hogs, to win him some money, which I totally understand if he had a
Right.
good inside tip. But like I was saying, down here in Miami, nobody's gonna rat you out, bro. Like everybody's doing 90% of the population is doing shit they shouldn't be doing down here. So nobody's gonna rat anybody out because they could just turn around and just rat the other person out again.
Right. Well, so far they've been very lucky. Nothing like that has surfaced in Coral Gables. I'm keeping my fingers crossed long term here. We'll talk a little bit about that. Mailbag questions, and then the theme really for this show, I wanted it to be, um, what's the next step for Miami in season two under Mario Cristobal? We're gonna go and look at some other season twos, not only in Miami history, but some of these other programs that have had some success and won national titles. What's the jump from year one to year two? And what path do we think Mario and this program is on? We'll get into that. But first, the big recruiting weekend, Carlos, because look, they signed or they got a commitment from Jaden Davis, who was a starter at Oklahoma. So they brought another cornerback in. He's a kid, South Florida kid, St. Thomas Aquinas, 22 game starter, not a superstar. I think that's sort of the theme for the transfer portal this year from Miami.
Yeah.
I think their best players were on the offensive line. I think the Matt Lees and Javian Cohens of the world, those guys that they picked up before spring football were big. I think this group of guys, the guys that are visiting this weekend, the ones that they're sort of after, I don't think it's gonna. You're not gonna have a De'Aaron King, Jalen Phillips type of impact with any of these guys that you get, but they will help your depth, and I think that's probably just as important as getting the frontline guys as Mario's pursuit of that is. So um, before I get your opinion on this, I'm just gonna go through a list of names of guys who are here this weekend because I want to make sure I include it. Some of this is reported by others. Some of this is on my part. I was able to independently confirm the two JUCO kids that are here. The Coffeyville College, Amari Wiggins. He's an offensive lineman, 6'3", about 300 pounds. Went to the same high school, Pensacola Pine Forest. As last week is number 5 overall pick. Seahawks cornerback Devon Witherspoon. Witherspoon was an unranked recruit coming out of high school and ends up signing with Illinois, becomes a star there. This kid comes from the same high school. Miami was his first Power Five offer. Maryland, Memphis, Temple, Toledo. There's some other schools involved. Oregon and South Carolina are also talking to him. I think he's sort of the center of the future if Miami's able to get him. I think the Hurricanes have a good shot with him. Another kid who's here, JUCO kid, Shamar Kirk, wide receiver. He's out from Reedley College. He's 22 years old, Carlos. Told me this morning it's an unofficial visit for him. He's taken all of his official visits already. I think Texas A&M might be the leader for this kid. He's originally from Tennessee. Like I said, 22 years old. He took 2 years off from after high school before he got into community college out there in California. Started playing there. A lot of production, close to 1,500 yards receiving. We'll see if Miami can impress him this weekend. And then you have some kids that have been playing both Power Five and Division One football. Nebraska's AJ Allen is a running back, second-year player, as a true freshman, played some at Nebraska before he broke his collarbone. You have North Texas graduate student linebacker Larry Nixon the third, 6'2", 236, so another big linebacker. Offers from Cincinnati and Auburn as well as Miami. And then you got two defensive tackles, which is really the most important position. Kievi Rose from Louisiana Tech, 6'3", 303 pounds, out of Henderson, Texas. He was all Conference USA last year. Again, not Daryl Jackson, big, but a big dude. And then Ole Miss defensive tackle Tywone Malone. He played baseball, 6'4", 300 pounds, 4-star recruit, top 100 recruit in 2021. Only played 97 snaps last year, but potential is obviously there. So those are 6 names to know. I know there's other kids that they're also having conversations with. In fact, I spoke with another sort of true freshman who transferred out, a kid out of Vanderbilt, Jadaeus Richard, 6'2", 197 pounds. He told me he was here at Miami this weekend, even though it really hasn't been reported. 2022 3-star prospect, played in 11 games as a true freshman, started against Tennessee, 6 tackles, a sack, and two pass breakups, 203 snaps. Again, I just wanted to go over the list of guys. What is your take on all of that? On who they've got here this weekend, and should Miami fans be worried that there's no receiver additions yet?
Yeah, I think they should be. I think them reaching for a guy that's a project from a JUCO school that took 2 years off after high school is, a bit concerning if that's the best prospect they can land in terms of an outside receiver, which means, maybe the guy develops, maybe he becomes something special. But what you really wanted was a proven guy, a guy that you could plug into the lineup right now, like a Keon Coleman, get him out there on the outside, pair him with the other guys, and then create a little bit more depth and create a little bit more size on the outside to be able to have a bit more breathing room for TVD when he throws the ball down the field, and to have a guy that can make 50-50 catches, to go up and make catches in traffic. But at the end of the day, it is what it is at this point. I mean, it's become kind of a trend that the staff is having issues recruiting high-end receivers. I mean, they did it with the high school guys this past cycle. Right now, it's not trending that direction in high school just yet. We'll see if that turns around. But in the portal, it just haven't been able to put their finger on the right guy. Aside from Colby Young, who was a revelation last year, but he alone can't do it on the outside. So something has to give. Either they're thinking this kid could develop into something special, or they feel comfortable that they don't need a superstar right now because they feel that the receiver room is coming along, which, I mean, based on what we've read and seen in the spring, I don't know if that's the case. Some guys like Ray Joseph, I think, are looking really good, can be a real impact early on, but the rest of the guys remain to be seen. You got your Restrepo back, but I think the issue is still on the outside. To me, I'm happy about the 2 defensive tackle recruits. They need that. If they could land both those guys, that'd be a huge help because they need size inside. They need a nose tackle, one technique type guy, or a couple guys to help rotate in there. Because essentially, Leonard Taylor and Jared Harrison Hunter are the same player in terms of size, skill set, what they do. They're really 3 techniques, pass rushing 3 techniques. They're not run stuffing guys. They can on occasion stuff the run, but they're at their best when they're coming upfield and attacking the quarterback. And that's what they do, disrupting the line of scrimmage. You need guys that could take on double teams, take on blocks, take on trap blocks, and fight that and allow linebackers to flow to the football. Of course, I think they still need cornerback help. If they can land one more, I know Jaden Davis is a help. He's not a superstar by any means. He was okay at Oklahoma. He adds depth. He's better than what they had, I think, last season. So there's going to be a bunch of average guys out there at corner. Hopefully, because the safeties play is really good, or should be really good, coming into the season with both Cam and James Williams. If they could elevate their game even more, that will cover up a lot of what's going on the outside. You'll have better linebackers in there. They'll probably be better in coverage aside from being better and making plays in the run game. And if you could pressure the quarterback, that obviously always helps. And I think they've got a bunch of good edge rushers that'll help that situation. So to me, if they come away with those two defensive tackles and nothing else, I'm happy. But I think they still need a running back. I think they still need a corner. And I mean, you could always add another offensive lineman. My concern, I said it on my pod last week, was I don't know that Jalen Rivers is a left tackle. I don't know that he has the feet to be a left tackle. There were times where I was watching the spring game and it looked like his feet weren't good enough to be a left tackle. He was being beaten around the edge. There was a bunch of sacks that weren't called during that game that they let go that to me looked a little bit, unimpressive on the offensive line. So either Zion comes back healthy and you plug him in and move Jalen Rivers back inside, or land another left tackle, or Manuel has to go outside the left tackle, and then you figure something else out. But I think they could use one more offensive lineman in there, maybe to plug in inside or outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think this kid from Coffeyville that I told you about, I think he's sort of that option on the inside. Javian Cohen is a guy who I think could play outside if you had to have him play outside, kind of the way DJ Scaife did at times last year and in the past. Look, none of these guys are special. Okay, none of the guys are going to come in here and all of a sudden be the number one or number two player on your team, but they're quality guys, rotational type pieces.
Let me interrupt you for 30 seconds. I'm going to
Yeah.
go get the door. Publix has arrived. You keep on your
Okay.
analysis.
All right. I will keep going with my analysis while you go get Publix. One thing I was gonna say, I guess I'll say this to Carlos once he gets back, is this Miami roster through the spring anyway. I thought the receiver position, some of the feedback we got was, some of these guys have taken strides forward. Brashard Smith, we heard a lot of positive things about Jacoby George. We heard a lot of positive things about Jacoby. Ended up catching 2 touchdown passes in the spring game. Obviously, you would like that burner on the outside. You would like to get the kind of guy who can stretch the field and really respect you. But if this offensive line improves, and it will be better when Javian Cohen and Inez Cooper are in there in the starting lineup, then I think they can have the kind of balance that they probably want, long term. They can have the kind of 1-2 punch where you can run some play action, run the ball on first down and pick up positive yardage. I mean, those guys are going to move the line of scrimmage forward. That could make passing a whole lot easier for this program going forward. So to me, I'm not as worried anymore after what I saw in the spring about the receiver position. I'd like a guy who could stretch the field, but I don't necessarily think it's like make or break. You don't have this guy, and all of a sudden your offense is extremely limited. We're gonna see what happens when Elijah Arroyo gets back at the tight end position. You can make a Jaleel Skinner just a complimentary guy. You make a Cam McCormick your blocking tight end. So from an offensive perspective, I think we're fine. To me, the bigger issue for Miami is the defensive side, and I think like Carlos mentioned, replacing Daryl Jackson is going to be really, really tough. And you need those big bodies. You need those run stuffers. I thought Ahmad Moten looked pretty good in the spring game. He's just a second-year player. It's hard to count on those guys to come in here and play major snaps. If you can limit Ahmad Moten to 15, 20 snaps a game, and he's your fourth or fifth defensive tackle, and he's there to sort of relieve guys off the bench, then I think you're in a better situation. If he's got to be your number 2 or your number 3 guy because of injuries, Leonard Taylor gets banged up or Jared Harrison Hunt gets banged up and they can't play early in the season, you got to play Ahmad Moten. That's troublesome. It's not because Ahmad Moten isn't talented. It's because you're asking him to play 45, 50 snaps instead of 15. And I think, that's the issue Mario Cristobal is trying to figure out right now. It's how can I get enough depth at some of these positions so I'm not over stressing certain players that aren't capable of playing 40, 50, 60 snaps a game and being dominant at their position. That's why you have to have depth. That's where the Georgias and the Alabamas and the best teams in the country every single year beat you because they can bring a 5-star off the bench and only play him 10 to 15 snaps really young and let him thrive in that sort of role. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, who Miami ultimately gets here. I know the scholarship numbers is sort of a topic as well. Miami only had 2 guys leave at the end of the transfer portal here, and so by my math, they're about 81 or 82 scholarships right now. So the one thing I will say ultimately is some of these dudes who may not have been playing in spring football or did play in spring football could just turn into students, and those scholarships are sort of taken. So if Miami wants to create space, they can still do that. Even if these guys don't enter the transfer portal, they can just turn them into students, and that'll open up the kind of space to take as many of these dudes as they want. So I was just, I know you stepped away for a minute, Carlos, but basically I went over my analysis of offense. I think the bigger need is on defense. I think D tackle is a bigger need than receiver. I thought, we saw some things this spring that were a little encouraging. Obviously, Elijah Royal has to come back at tight end. We'll see how he is. I think the bigger need, I would love for them to go out and get a Charleston Rambo who could stretch the field, but I don't think it's make or break for this offense by any stretch. I would even venture to say I think getting a healthy running back like an AJ Allen, this kid out of Nebraska who was pretty good, who earned the nickname Quick Six in high school, ran for 2,200 yards a senior. Getting that guy is extra insurance in case something that happens to a Don Chaney Jr., or some of the other guys that you have on this team, and not having to count on a true freshman to have to deliver big. I think that's sort of a bigger need, even maybe right now, than wide receiver, because there are guys that can play.
Right. I mean, I don't know if it's a bigger need per se, but I mean, if I had to go without a receiver, as long as we landed an additional running back, to me, that's fine. I'll take that because, like you said, I think counting on Don Chaney coming off 2 knee injuries, counting on Henry Parrish again, being a smallish guy that also was nicked up last year, you can't count on those 2 guys to be your featured back. I don't think. I don't think you count on Mark Fletcher to be a significant carry significant load as a running back his freshman year, especially from a pass protection standpoint. Now he may pick it up. He may be by the end of the year. I think he's going to be in the rotation, but I think you need that insurance, like you said, from a veteran guy who could pick up pass protection quickly, who understands how to play the game, who's effective as a running back and can spell the other 2 guys. So if you've got 3 veteran guys you can rely on, if one goes down, then you can move up one of the freshmen or at least Mark Fletcher to step in there and make plays. I mean, you saw what happened last year with Lucius Stanley. We had to pick him up off basically the Publix checkout line and throw him into the field.
Yeah.
To try and provide some sort of insurance there for the running back room. So I think it's important to get an additional running back just because of the injury history of Chaney. Trevante Citizen obviously is not going to be counted on this year. At least it doesn't seem like it too much, or at least till the end of the year. So it's important to get another one. Now, would I love to have both a running back and a receiver? If you get that, you're golden, I think. Would I prefer a Charleston Rambo type? Yes. But if you can get somebody that you feel with size and speed that you feel can add something to the room at receiver, then I'll be happy. But I think overall, to me, the biggest concern on both sides of the ball is defensive tackle, and then second would be corner.
Right. And Branson Dean and the other kid that they picked up via the transfer portal. I mean, those guys again, depth pieces. You forget. In fact, I'm going to look at the list now of how many defensive tackles ultimately ended up leaving the team here between this year and last year. And look at my departure list. This is just transferred out. Daryl Jackson, Jordan Miller, Alan Hay, Elijah Roberts, Jabari Ishmael, Thomas Davis. Those are your 70. 3 of those guys were defensive tackles. And then, I'm not mistaken, there was other guys that ran out of eligibility, right, and graduated. Let me look at the list here. Antonio Moultrie, and then Mitchell Agude was another rotational guy up front. So I mean, yeah,
Lichtenstein also was out. Is gone, right?
No, Lichtenstein is back. He's back. He got like his 18th season of eligibility.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So, but again, just from a body perspective, you just look at the roster right now, D tackles. You got Lichtenstein, who's a graduate, 6'6", 270. Leonard Taylor, 6'3", 305, third-year guy. Harrison Hunt, 6'4", 295. Moton, 6'3", 300. And then Branson Dean, 6'2", 280. And Thomas Gore, 6', 270. And then you got the 2 true freshmen, Collins Anchampong and Joshua Horton. Anchampong is 6'7", 254, and Horton is 6'4", 285. Again, not the gigantic monster that Daryl Jackson.
Yeah, you want to do that 6'5", 310 to 320 in there.
Right. You want somebody who can take that pounding at least 30, 40 snaps a game
Yep.
and help you out. All right, let's get into the NFL draft because that happened as well. And I know there are a lot of Miami fans who are sort of upset, like, hey, this isn't production. But if you divide 259 picks, which is what it was, right? 7 rounds, and you divide it by 69 Power Five teams, the average per team should be about 3.5 to 4 draft picks. Yes, Miami fell short, but how far away are they really from where they should be? I would say 4 to 5 draft picks per year. I'd be pretty happy if you're Miami. Correct or incorrect?
Yeah, I would be happy, but again, this is disappointing. I mean, the highest draft pick you had was a second round guy that was actually a transfer from Georgia, so it wasn't a
Mm,
Miami recruit. The two guys drafted by Miami were in the fifth and seventh rounds. What you want to
right,
see is first through third, right? You want to see more of those guys, and it also counts where they're drafted, not just how many are drafted. So you can
right.
have 4 guys drafted in the seventh round, it doesn't mean shit because that means your talent wasn't good enough. If you're having 4 guys drafted in rounds 1 through 3, then you're making an impact, and those guys are legitimate players, are going to make an NFL roster, and in many cases maybe start and make an impact. So to me, it's not just the number, it's the quality of the number that needs to improve as well.
Yeah, I mean those are fair points, and I know some people have come out with draft projections already for next year, and somebody wrote an article saying there could be as many as 4 hurricanes in the first round.
Well, I
Uh,
remember somebody predicted a couple of years ago there was going to be 15 Hurricanes drafted,
yeah, that yeah, we know who said that. Okay, Kelvin Harris.
and about 13 of them were going to be in the first round.
Right, and they only ended up with one drafted a year ago with John Ford. So yes, I think sometimes as a fan base you can get a little ahead of yourself, but I think right now we were to look at this roster and we were honest with ourselves, right, and we're not putting on the green and orange glasses that some people like to put on. Who, in your mind, in all honesty, is a first round pick on this roster right now?
Potentially TVD. If he's a TVD of 2 years ago and he expands upon that, he could be a first round pick depending on how he plays this year.
Right.
Is he going to be? I don't know. I mean, that's up in the air, but he will be drafted. I can say that pretty confidently. I think maybe Javian Cohen is not a first round pick, but I think maybe he could be a second or third rounder if he has a really good season. Down the road, some of the freshmen could be first round picks, but I really don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. There's a lot of unknowns with the younger guys because we haven't seen them play yet, or a lot of them haven't developed yet to that point. Could Cam Kitchens be a first round pick? I don't know. He's a bit of a smallish safety. He's a ball hawk. He's produced a lot, but then you're looking at a guy kind of like Jaquan Johnson, who was a great producer, but not the biggest guy in the world. So that makes him slip down the draft board. You know, the NFL loves those measurables and those quantifiables, which to me a lot of that is bullshit. Which that's how you end up with DJ Ivy getting drafted when his production was throughout his entire career, just because he's got size and speed. So I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you, but I think to me, the top candidate at this point would be TVD, followed by like a Cam Kitchens, if they overlook the size.
Yeah, I think if Zion Nelson comes back and has a monster year and is really phenomenal, where he's one of the best left tackles in
Yeah,
college football, I think he has the feet to do it. But
yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. My concern is his injury. He's been out too long. I don't know if he's ever going to come back the same.
Right. And then I would say the other guy is probably Leonard Taylor. And I
Yeah,
think that's just because he's a disruptive, pass rushing, creative defensive tackle, which with the 5-star pedigree, I think once you're a 5-star, whether you like it or not, that if you could be productive and you're a 5-star for whatever reason, it doesn't matter if you're not the best at your position. The NFL looks at you and gives you some serious consideration. And I think those guys, the boat is probably passed on James Williams. I don't think he's capable of sort of recapturing the magic just because he's been so inconsistent with tackling. I think some
yeah,
people probably look at him as he's playing out of position. He needs to play linebacker at the next level, that type of thing. But in terms of guys that are returning, I would say those guys have the best shot. But my prediction would be that right now they're day 3 picks.
yeah.
If they play the way that they have here the last couple of years, I
Yeah, and
mean,
if we're honest with Leonard Taylor's got a lot of upside and he's had flashes, but he hasn't been dominant.
mm-hmm.
He's been really good at times, but there's been other times where he's disappeared and he's gotten mauled. So some people argue it's because of the lack of snaps that he hasn't gotten enough opportunities. Okay, well, this is a year he's got to prove it. It's a put up or shut up year. This is the year Leonard Taylor has to prove why he was a 5-star recruit and one of the top defensive tackles, if not the top defensive tackle recruit in the country when he came out. But he has to prove that he's got that motor and the ability to dominate games when it counts uh, at all times, and especially in crunch time. So we'll see what happens this season.
Um, All right, I mentioned the gambling at the top of the show. Part of the reason I brought it up was because I saw some odds for a few Miami Hurricanes games this fall. It's still very early. I've yet to see real win totals put out by Vegas. Although I think Miami, tentatively is probably 7 win mark is sort of their is going to be their line. But I found some of these numbers interesting. Number one, Miami is a 10-point underdog at home versus Clemson, sort of the opening line, and a 16 and a half point underdog at Florida State. I know you and I exchanged text messages earlier this week when that line came out. I didn't talk to you about it. What's your
Holy shit.
what's your initial reaction
I
to 16 and a
mean,
half on the road in Tallahassee?
Vegas apparently thinks that Chief Osceola is going to take that flaming spear and shove it right up our tush. Wow. I did not expect it to be I did not expect the Florida State line to be bigger than the Clemson line, to be quite honest with you. I thought it'd be about even. If it was 10 also for Florida State, I'd be okay. That's fine. But 16 and a half, shit. I mean, but that shows you how bad the Hurricanes were last year. And Vegas has no confidence in them this year. I mean, yeah, let's say they do make a 3 touchdown improvement compared to last year's game. They're still getting beat by 2 touchdowns, right?
Three touchdowns.
Three
Three
touchdowns.
three touchdowns, yeah.
So, I mean, I understand it. I understand why it's 16 and a half. So it's up to them to prove it that they're wrong, to prove Vegas wrong. But who knows? Maybe that's why Alabama's coach got busted. When he saw that line, he was like, 16 and a half? Shit. I'm putting my money down right now before that line changes.
I went back and I looked up these numbers. It's kind of interesting. How do you think Miami did against the spread last year? What do you think their record was?
Ooh, 3-9.
1-11. Can you name the win?
The one win. Definitely not Middle Tennessee. Texas A&M.
Georgia Tech.
Wow.
Yes. The line against Southern Miss was 26 and a half. They won by 23. The line against Texas A&M was 6.5. They lost by 8. Middle Tennessee, they were favored by 25 and a half. We know what happened there. They were favored to beat North Carolina by 4. They lost by 3. Favored to beat Virginia Tech by 9, only won by 6. Um, let's see here. Duke favored to win by 10 and only won by actually
One.
lost by
They got
24. Sorry,
mollywopped.
yeah, sorry about that. UVA favored to win by 3, only won by 2. Florida State underdog by 6.5, lost by 42. Georgia Tech underdog by 2.5, won by 21. And then Clemson underdog by 19, lost by 30. Pittsburgh underdog by 4.5, lost by 26.
Yeah.
Not a good year to gamble on the Canes.
Yeah, I don't. You know what? That's why I stay away from home teams. Like I'm not a gambler anyway, but like the stuff that I've gambled on in the past, I learned early on. Whenever I put any money on anything, I don't bet on the home team. I don't bet on my favorite teams because I let my emotions cloud me. Unless it's something that I see it's pretty obvious that I feel it's it has. Okay, I've got to lay the money down. I really don't worry about what the lines are for my team because it usually bites me in the ass.
All right. Our theme for the show today is what season 2 should we expect from Miami? And I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a mixed bag research because I think we have to sort of characterize, first of all, what this is. Considering the fact that it's been 22 years since Miami won its last national championship, we can't go back and look at Jimmy Johnson's second year and say that he's in the same position as Mario Cristobal was.
Right.
We can't even go back and look at any Dennis Erickson years because he won the championship his first year. Butch Davis, yeah, I went back and I looked. Randy Shannon, yes. Al Golden, yes. Mark Richt, yes. Manny Diaz, yes. But first, Carlos, let's start. We'll start there because I did also look up Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Urban Meyer, and Jim Harbaugh. And that would be Urban Meyer at Ohio State. But let's look up Miami first.
Now let me throw this in there. When we
Yeah.
make our predictions for what we think year two is going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
we need to reference 2 TV shows.
Go
So
ahead.
we got to do a really good one that had a great season 2,
Mm-hmm.
and then one that had a really terrible season 2.
Okay. Go
So
for it.
we got to figure those. Well, when we make our predictions, so we got to figure those out at the end. So we got to say, what would you think was a great season 2 for one of the shows that you
Ted
enjoyed?
Lasso. Ted
Ted Lasso had a
Lasso.
great season 2. I'll agree with that. Ted Lasso.
Yep.
And who had a terrible season 2?
Mm. Some people might say Game of Thrones, right? It kind of took a step back for the Game of Thrones people. I don't
I
know.
was I was thinking maybe Game of Thrones. I didn't. I'll let it slide because it really got good starting season 3 and then up until season 6 where it dove off a cliff. But yeah, well let's go with that. Let's go with Game of Thrones or Ted Lasso.
All right. First of all, what do you? I'm going to throw the names out at you again. Howard Schnellenberger, Butch Davis, Randy Shannon, Al Golden, and Mark Richt and Manny Diaz. Okay, what they did in year 2.
Mhm.
Did any of them have a losing record in year 2?
Did any of them have a losing record in season 2? I know Howard did not. I know Manny, Randy, Mark Richt did not. Al Golden did not. Maybe Butch? No,
Nope.
he had none of them, right?
Yeah, one, two, three, four. Four out of the six actually finished in the AP top 25.
Look at that.
Kind of interesting, right? When you think about it. Butch Davis went 9-3 in his second season. Miami finished 14th in the AP poll. Randy Shannon went 7-6 in 2008. I mean, what did they do? I think they went five. They have a 5-win season in Randy's first year. Let me go back and look at
Yeah, they
2007.
were 5-7 in
They were
07.
5-7, very similar to our boy Mario here. Um, and then he went 7-6. Al Golden went 7-5 in 2012, and his first year they were
It was
six
six
and
and
six,
six.
right? Of course, he also had the scandal to deal with, the Nevin Shapiro scandal. Mark Richt went 10-3 in 2017. Remember, that was coming off a 9-4 debut. And then Manny Diaz 8-3 in 2020, coming off of that ridiculously terrible performance against Louisiana Tech in a 6-7 season the year before. So, based on that information, just from a Miami experience, what do you think is a fair expectation that's not asking too much of Mario?
Most of those guys averaged 1 to 2 win improvements, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think the only one that made a 4 game jump might have been like Howard Schnellenberger. I think he made like a big jump.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
Howard went 5-6 to 9-3.
right. So he's the only one that made like a 4 game jump.
Yeah.
So I would say
Mario's making $80 million, by the way.
yes,
And he has really good NIL resources and a
he does.
transfer portal.
Yes. But Luke was around back in the day also. So
All right.
kind of balanced. He might not have had as much money as John Ruiz, but he had the Luke dancers. That
Yes,
accounts for a
that
lot, my
that
friend.
that helped out. Okay.
It
Fair
also
enough.
helps out when you could take a recruit to the Rolex, make his jaw drop, and drool. That makes a huge difference when you're recruiting as well back in the day. So let's not skirt on Luke there. He did his job. So anyway, I would say I think a 2 game improvement is reasonable. I think you can go
7 wins.
you can go to 7 wins if they really take a leap, if they really hit a couple guys in the portal. I think if they get those 2 defensive tackles and they get another corner and maybe a receiver or a running back or both, then you're looking at 8 wins. I think you could realistically get to 8 wins. Getting to 9 might be tough. I don't know if they can beat Florida State this year. I don't know if they can beat Clemson. A&M, again, that's going to be a toss-up. They probably have more talent than we do. They do. But can they use it against us this year with a revamped offense and a new quarterback? I don't know. So you're looking right there at A&M, Clemson, and Florida State, which if you look at our season last season, what's coming into this season, more than likely they're going to be underdogs in all 3 of those games. So right there, if they lose all 3 of those games, now you've got one more game against ACC competition that you could probably that you're going to slip up and get to 8 wins. So Carolina's still going to be tough. Uh, I don't know who else is going to be at the top of the ACC. Pitt will be tough, but not as good as they've been in the past. So who knows? I think reasonably 7 to 8 wins should be the expectation coming into this season.
Does it change at all though when you hear what Howard did in year 2, what uh Manny even did in year 2? The fact that he was able to sort of take that big of a leap up.
Well, I think the difference between what Howard did and what Manny did is, and what we're going into here is a little bit different. So Howard took the resources, the freshmen that he gathered from around the inner city in Miami, and made that sort of the backbone of the team to help boost them up to more success. And the reason that happened was because those kids were normally going out of state, going to different colleges, going to different places. He kept them home for the first time, and they made a huge impact on the program just from that talent level. And also, they weren't dealing with the same sort of competition in terms of recruitment that everybody's dealing with nowadays. Manny had the COVID advantage. So because he had that COVID advantage, a lot of teams were depleted when they played. You remember Virginia Tech when they played them, they were down like 30 guys.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily that they were that good. They were just more healthy than a lot of the teams during that season, and got lucky. They got some lucky bounces too. It wasn't just them blowing people out. And as you saw towards the end of the year, when North Carolina ran for 6,555 yards in one game, that started to catch up to them at the end of the season. So to me, all things considered, realistically, reasonably, a 2 to 3 game jump, so 7 to 8 wins to me would be reasonable.
Fair enough. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just think in the end, we love to do this as a society, right? Is go back at the end of the year and say, well, what did Butch do in year two, or what did Howard do in year two? It's kind of good to look at it on the front end before we even get to that discussion.
And if you look at those guys, it's 1 to 2 games is the reasonable jump. It's normal,
right.
right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Howard went from 5 to 9. But again, it's I think the other side of it too is we're expecting Mario to do much better, right? Because of the amount of money that he's making, because of the fact that he's been a head coach at Oregon and had some success there, that he had some success at FIU. Um, here's the bigger comparison, which is where Miami's administration, I think, wants to compare him. Um, the Nick Sabans, the Dabo Sweeneys, the Urban Meyers, even the Jim Harbaughs, who I know you like to look at Michigan, right, as a fairer comparison for
Yeah.
Miami, especially in light of the fact that they've made 2 playoff appearances in a row here. Um, let's start with Nick Saban. When he took over the program at Alabama in 2007, they were coming off a pretty terrible year, but they had some talent on the roster. Saban in his debut year, I'm looking at this here, 5 wins vacated. He was really 7 and 5, I guess, his first year um, on the job. Um, 2008, his second year, they finished 12-2, number 6 in the country. Kirby Smart was his defensive coordinator. Him and Kevin Steele. Um, Jim McElwain was his offensive coordinator. Pretty drastic jump for Nick Saban, but that's why he's the best in the business. Dabo, when he took over Clemson, which I think is a little bit more comparable to Miami because they were kind of in the hole in the ACC. Florida State was the best team. Dabo Sweeney took over, remember, in the middle of the year in 2006. His first full season, he went 7-6, and then his second full season, he went 9-5, and lost to Georgia Tech in the ACC championship game. Went to the Music City Bowl, got to 9 wins. Dabo Sweeney did. Um, Urban Meyer 12-0 when he took over at Ohio State in year one, 12-2 the next season. Made
Oh,
the
he slipped. He slipped.
Yeah, he slipped. And then the following year after that, I mean, they were playing for championships, winning championships. Jim Harbaugh, first season in 2015 at Michigan, he took over the program. Let me look at what the record was in 2014. I'm scrolling backwards here. His first year, he went 10-3. He took over a 5-7 program. Went 10-3 year one, and then in year two, 10-3, finished 10th in the top 25 poll. Jabril Peppers was the leader of that team. So I guess the whole point of bringing all of this up, Carlos, is we're ultimately going to compare Mario, and we should, right? This is what Miami expects him to have, that kind of an impact where he goes on a championship level path or a playoff path. Um, if he doesn't get to 8 or 9 wins, is he underwhelming? Is he not doing his job?
If he doesn't get to 8 wins, I could see why people would say he's underwhelming. But if you keep it in perspective, remembering what kind of a disaster last year was, if they get to 7 wins and it's 7 wins where they lose games where they're highly competitive against conference opponents and not losing to non-conference group of 5 low tier schools, I think that makes a difference. And I think if you get some sort of revenge against a team like Duke and win games that maybe you weren't expected to win, that 7-5 looks a little bit different. So long as you see progress, I think that's the key. I think you need to see progress on the field. Ideally, I'd like to see them get to 8 wins, I think if they get to 8 wins, people will feel comfortable, or at least I'll feel comfortable with the direction of the program where it's heading, coming off of last season. Will people be happy? No, because what does everybody expect for next season? Everybody wants a championship. Everybody's like, oh, they got to compete for the ACC title. They got to be in the ACC title game next year. They got to be a playoff team. Dude, it's not that easy. I mean, you people forget very quickly. They have very short memories as to how terrible this team was last year and the reasons why it was terrible. It needed to be ripped from the foundation and sort of rebuilt from the ground up, which is why I think Howard is probably the best comparison because Howard had to do that, just in a less competitive recruiting environment, I would think, and that's why Howard had that big jump. But he's also a great coach, which is another reason why they had a big jump. That helps. So, does Mario earn his 80 million? Is basically what you're asking this season. If he gets to 8 to 9 wins, I would say he does. I think he does earn that 80 million or 8 million for that season if he gets to 8 to 9 wins. Does he do it if he gets to 7 wins? Nah, maybe not, but it's understandable. If he has a 6 win season, then we're talking about, listen, dude, how about we restructure that contract? Can I get a little bit of that money back? Because I think we're overpaying you a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation because I think unintentionally we sort of stumbled into what is a fair comparison, right? Like what should we who should we compare him to?
Right.
And maybe Howard is the perfect example because it's been so long since this program has been relevant that it's almost the same gap, right? Compared to Howard.
We want him to be at the Howard level, right? From a coaching perspective and a recruiting perspective and success. But I think might sound controversial. The better comparison is probably Randy Shannon right now, because Randy stepped into a situation where the program was in shambles. He had to rebuild it from the ground up. He relied heavily on freshmen, on a big recruiting class, the number one recruiting class in the country, to help rebuild the program and take it from there. And I think that is probably a more fair comparison to what the situation that Mario's running through. I know.
Here's why I would disagree with you and strike back. Randy was on the national championship team that had only won a championship 5 years prior to that. And there still was residue. There were still kids who had seen Miami win a championship. And it was a little easier to recruit to Miami then than it was now. And the proof was in the pudding. He signed the number one recruiting class in the country in 2007. Why? Because he was going to take over and things were going to change and blah, blah, blah. I think Mario almost steps into a bigger hole from how far you're removed from a championship perspective. And I think that in a lot of ways affects things. I think a lot of this last recruiting class was the result of NIL helping Miami go out and get a lot of the guys that they wanted. I don't know that that's going to win over anybody in year two. I think a lot of these kids are going to be looking to see what they do in year two with this new staff and if steps forward are honestly taken. And so I think it's much more like a Howard type situation to me because they're so far removed from a championship. None of the kids that he's recruiting remember Miami winning. They don't. Yeah. I mean, some of them don't even remember the 30 for 30s. That's how long the 30 for 30s has been out. So I think I think it's a little bit more of a stiffer challenge in that regard. But Howard was great at what he did. Like you said, he really, went into South Florida and got some elite players. Mario, I think, is doing it from a more national perspective. But look, the pressure's on, man. Like you're making that money, you got to deliver.
I think at the end of the day, we've seen Mario be a great recruiter, but I think it's been mostly up front on the lines where he's done his best job. I think the test for Mario down the road, whether or not this program is successful or elite, is his ability or his staff's ability to recruit skill position players, especially on the offensive side of the football. We'll see how that goes. If he can flip that narrative that he is a ground and pound guy, that skill position players go there to die in his program, if he could flip that narrative and get some guys that are explosive, big time, unquestioned 5-star playmakers at the skill position at offense, that may determine whether or not this program gets back to being elite.
Let's get to our mailbag. This is from Junior at Zoe.
We're jumping the gun now.
Zofessional. What's that?
Your prediction. Is it Game of Thrones season 2 or is it Ted Lasso season 2 this season?
I'm leaning towards Game of Thrones.
Okay. Wow. All right.
I feel like this is going to be a little underwhelming, but I could see it spinning around at the end. I could see as some of these younger players get going that maybe at the end of season two.
So maybe it's the momentum of the end of season 2 of Game of Thrones that starts leading into season 3 and the Red Wedding and all that stuff.
Right, right.
Okay, okay. So not a disaster season 2, but a rough one, but trending upwards
I think they could get to 8 wins with a bowl victory.
with a bowl victory. Okay, so that's a very sneaky way of saying you think they're going to go 7-5.
Kind of.
You just tried to duck the fact that you said they were going to be 7-5.
I think I don't have a lot of confidence right now that these true freshmen are going to come in and be dominant
Yeah,
players. It just doesn't happen. And I don't know that there's enough in the transfer portal, as you mentioned, defensive tackle, cornerback, even stretching the field, receiver, depth at running back. Those are all concerns.
right. Yeah. And you're going to have coin flip games. There are going to be a lot of close conference games, and it could go either way. Play here, play there. An injury, a setback, those types of things happen. So you never know. I think 7-5, 8-4 is reasonable.
What did you? What's your season then? Ted Lasso or?
I don't know, man. Ted Lasso over season 2 is really damn good. So I'm going to go Game of Thrones also.
All right, so we settled on the same one.
Yeah.
Let's get to the mailbag now. I want you to get back to brewing your alcohol, which I got to try at some point.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I'll let you know afterwards.
All right, let me know afterward. This is from Junior Zofessional on Twitter. Do you think Coach Dawson's offense will be successful enough to scheme up at least 2 wins that are unexpected? I haven't seen a UM offense attack a team's weakness for a win in years. Example: FSU's counter run us to death like UNC. Hopefully, Guidry can fix that issue. Please, God, LOL.
Well, I think you saw Red Lashley scheme some wins up for the Hurricanes. I think
Right.
you saw him use that against Pitt.
Louisville.
Louisville, I think it was another great example. I think NC State, they also came out with a great game plan early in the game to get Tyler Van Dyke going, get him confidence to take a lead early in that game. So
Mm-hmm.
I think Red Lashley did a lot of that. I think we lost it last year. Hopefully Guidry brings it back. And I think that was one of my biggest complaints last year with Josh Gaddis was that there was no attacking the other team's weaknesses and scheming guys open or using different schematic plays and motions and route schemes to free guys up for big plays. That was a big difference between him and Red Lashley.
This is from Asher Wildman 13. Asher frequently listens to us. Do you think Demarcus Van Dyke was a coaching roster squeeze? Listening to your tea leaves, it seemed like Joe Salavea was expected to go to the NFL and it didn't happen. How valuable is the Samoan relationship he brings? Where does UM's cornerbacks rank in the ACC? There's so much turnover. Where does last year versus this year? All right, threw a lot of questions there at us, Asher. Let's start with DVD. Do I think he was a coaching roster squeeze? Yeah, I think there probably was a scenario where Joe Salavea would have gone to the NFL. I know he's making a lot of money as an assistant coach. I think his Samoan relationships are very, very big. It certainly helped with the Maui Goas. I think it certainly helps with them going forward.
Yep.
But I think the plan for both Salavea and even Mario was for him to try to get an NFL job. Didn't happen. I know he interviewed for at least one. Didn't get the job. Now he's back. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that he's back. Unfortunately, DVD wants to coach, and there's no spot for him at Miami. Remember, we did have discussions at a certain point that we thought that the NCAA would expand the number of on-field coaches you could have, and ultimately they didn't do that. So you only had the 10 assistants. Demarcus Van Dyke ends up going to FIU, where, by the way, he's not leaving town. So he could very much come back a year from now or 2 years from now and not have to move his family or do anything drastic. So being at FIU is sort of the perfect waiting area, I think, for him. As far as where do UM's cornerbacks rank in the ACC, tough question to answer because I haven't really broken down the whole conference, especially now after the transfer portal movement. I think Florida State is clearly number one. They got Fentress from Virginia. They had some good players coming back at that position to begin with. Clemson obviously continues to have talent at that position, recruit well. North Carolina lost their DBs coach, Dre Bly. Some of those guys left, Storm Duck, etc. So I don't know. I think Miami's cornerbacks right now, I would say, are middle of the conference. I wouldn't say they're the worst, but I also wouldn't say I have a lot of confidence in them either. I think there's a lot of inexperience there. I think Devontae Brown looked average for the most part this spring, the transfer from UCF. I think the kid they got out of Iowa wasn't necessarily that great. Didn't hear rave reviews about him. So it's pushing the Corey Couches of the world and some of the other younger guys that they have into positions where they have to be contributors. And I'm not so confident in that. What's your take on all that, Carlos?
I think the better question is, are they going to be better than last year? How do they compare to last year's cornerback group? And I think certainly Tyreek Stevenson was the best corner last year when he was healthy. I don't think they have anybody near that skill level at this point right now. But overall, as a group, can they be as good or at least good enough? Maybe. That remains to be seen. I don't think they have the talent there right now. I don't think those guys are the younger guys are ready to step in and make the plays that they need them to make to be the kind of guys that need to be frontline guys. So it could be hit or miss. I think they're going to be average at corner, but can they be average and schematically sound?
Right.
Can they do that? Because you can have a hell of a lot of talent. You saw with DJ Ivey, he got drafted, great measurables, but he was constantly lost in the scheme. He didn't understand what he was doing out there a lot of the time. So if you could be sound schematically and understand your responsibility, and if you just get beat because guys are better athletes than you, that shit's going to happen. But being sound in the scheme is going to help a lot. And then you've got those two guys in the back to try and erase the mistakes. So I would say the better question is, will they be better than last year? I think overall, as a group, I think they'll be slightly better.
Well, it will if you're creating more pressure up front, and
Exactly. Yeah.
which is really what they brought Lance Guidry in for, to be more aggressive, to run that Manny Diaz type defense. Daryl Porter, I will say, he looked better to me in the spring game than I expected him to. He's the experienced guy. At least he's a 14 game starter. Corey Couch has played 1,700 snaps. This kid Jaden Davis has played 1,500 snaps, and Devontae Brown's played 1,900 snaps. So from an experience standpoint, there's guys that have at least played and made starts. The question is quality. Are any of those guys a real number one? And I really can't answer that question for you. I don't think that they are right now. All right, let's move on to the final mailbag question. Carlos, this is from Coach Travieso Magic Buck on Twitter. After such a disappointing 2022 football season, I've been very concerned about Raul from Hialeah. Does anyone have an update on how he is doing?
Listen, last I heard, he was drinking his weight in Coquito
Mm-hmm.
throughout Hialeah during the holidays. He has disappeared ever since. As we get closer to the season, I'm sure he'll pop up, probably with 3 or 4 more felony offenses on his record, probably a few more scratches on his face from getting into a little couple dust ups, right? So I don't know, man. I don't know how he's doing right now. I can tell you he was not happy at the end of the season. He was not happy with the way things went. He was very disappointed in Mario Cristobal as a Cuban, aside from being a football coach. So we'll see. I'm sure Raul's going to pop up sooner or later, and he's going to be disgruntled when he does.
Yeah, I hope to hear from him soon. Hopefully, he'll give us his thoughts on the 2022 season. I don't know that we've necessarily gotten them yet. So, Carlos, thanks for coming on and partnering with me on this. Make sure you check out his podcast, the MIA All Day Podcast. We will be back with more coverage over the summer as time progresses. Obviously, we do fewer and fewer of these episodes during this dry season, but as news persists, we will be on top of it. We will be reporting it. We will be talking about it on the show. In the meantime, enjoy Cinco de Mayo. Put your drinks up. I have my invisible drink here. I'm gonna knock a few back.
It ain't gonna be a dry day today. I'll tell you that much.
It's
Summer beer time, baby. Summer beer. Let's go.
Thanks for coming on, Carlos. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, go Canes.